Kanou Shinichi, an otaku who had just recently faced rejection from his crush due to his interests, is looking around for a job on the internet. Shinichi randomly lands on a company looking for an otaku, and as he happens to know a thing or two about it himself, he passes the online application test without even trying. Shinichi soon heads over for the interview as well, where his employer welcomes him into the company and shares a drink with him. Everything was going all too well until Shinichi passed out, and after having a nightmare, he found himself in a completely different room with a cute maid standing by his side. The maid was speaking a foreign language, so Shinichi had to wear a ring to communicate with her. The maid's name was Miyusel, and while Shinichi was trying to figure out where he was, a cop, Minori Koganuma, reveals that they were in the Eldent Empire right now. This was a completely different realm where mythical creatures like dragons existed, and as Shinichi was curious to know more about this place, his employer from earlier joined him for a meeting. The man apologizes to Shinichi and introduces himself as Matoba, a government employee who has brought Shinichi here so he can help the government in spreading the otaku culture in Eldent. Matoba tells Shinichi that he's supposed to look over the exportations of things like anime, manga, and video games, so Japan can form relations to trade with this kingdom. Mr. Otaku was reluctant at first, but at this point, he had no choice other than to comply, since he didn't know how he could return back to Japan. Matoba leaves for the time being, and Shinichi spends the rest of the evening getting to know Miyusel, who was actually a half-elf. The next day, Minori tells Shinichi to get ready, as now they were supposed to meet the Empress of Eldent. Shinichi gets properly dressed up and heads over to the Grand Palace, only to screw things up by abruptly calling the Supreme Ruler a cute little girl. Shinichi's loud mouth earns him a punch in the face from the ruler, but while she was ranting about such a rude remark, Matoba somehow manages to handle the situation. With things calmed down, the Empress introduces herself as Petralka, and Matoba further proposes the perks that the otaku culture would bring to Eldent. Everything's going just as planned, until Petralka's cousin Gallius starts to talk down on Shinichi, and that leads to him losing control again and mouthing Gallius off. Shinichi was certain that he was dead this time, but instead, Petralka found such courage entertaining and allowed the Japanese to start their Project Otaku in this kingdom. After the meeting is over, Matoba lets Shinichi plan things from here on out. As the language barrier would render any sort of anime or music to be useless, Shinichi starts doing his research while teaching some Japanese to Miyusel at nighttime. Things started getting together real soon, and Shinichi managed to make a room full of otaku stuff as his base of operation. Petralka was intrigued by all this, but since she couldn't understand the manga herself, she made Shinichi read them to her. Shinichi found himself stuck in the middle of an empress and his maid, but while the situation was tricky to manage, it was nothing less of heaven for an otaku like our boy. Later, Shinichi figures that if he wants to spread his culture, he first needs to be accepted by the people, and in order to understand the townspeople, he takes a little stroll around with Minori and his other servant, Brooke. During the visit, Shinichi comes to know that the social hierarchy is a big problem in Eldent, as fun is only for the rich. This continues to bother Shinichi and eventually leads him to almost risk his life while trying to teach Petralka a lesson. Somehow, Shinichi convinces Petralka that freedom and equality are an essential part of Japanese culture, and she also lets him off the hook, ordering Shinichi to teach her Japanese as well. Some time passes by, and Shinichi utilizes his good relations with Petralka to build an otaku school for the children of nobles. During this time, as Shinichi was teaching Japanese to both Petralka and Miyusel, the Empress kept looking for chances to show dominance, but in reality, Miyusel had gotten far better at Japanese than her. Shinichi obviously wanted equality in Eldent as well, but whenever he tried treating Miyusel and Petralka in a similar manner, the Empress always showed a lot of disdain. Shinichi wasn't quite able to fathom why things were like this, but Minori clearly tells him that he was trying to change the way of life in Eldent, and if he keeps doing this, things can go wrong for him anytime. Soon, the otaku school starts to operate, but on the first day, Shinichi ends up upsetting Petralka by talking about Miyusel in front of her. This was already bad enough for Shinichi, but things got even worse when the school gets attacked by some men, putting Shinichi and his friends in danger. These men tied Shinichi's group up and started threatening to blow the whole building up if anyone tried to resist. The terrorists start off by questioning Shinichi about his motives, and while arguing, Shinichi continues to talk against their ideas of life and keeps explaining how equality isn't bad for Eldent. Eventually, the terrorists had enough, and they were about to decapitate Shinichi if it wasn't for Petralka stepping in and convincing them that Shinichi is really just an insignificant commoner. Shinichi gets spared, but now Petralka was in danger. Shinichi helps Minor get free, and he lures the terrorists outside, where he tricks them with the help of his smartphone and some banger anime tunes. The distractions allow Minori to take some of these guys down, and eventually helps Miyusel in taking care of the majority of these dudes. The gang leader was cornered pretty badly, so he opts for his last card and tries to set that magic explosive off. Things didn't quite go as that man planned though, as Shinichi easily extinguished the flame of the explosive with a handy fire extinguisher. The gang leader had lost the battle, but while going down, he tried to take Petralka with him. To protect the Empress, Miyusel sacrifices herself and gets stabbed instead. Miyusel was in a really bad condition, and she was immediately taken for medical help. Shinichi is allowed to see her after the treatment was done, but after hearing Petralka say that she would never wake up, Shinichi is left devastated. Shinichi was getting all gloomy when it turned out that Petralka was just referring to her fish and that Miyusel was totally fine. Shinichi leaves the palace for the time being so Miyusel can recover, and in the meanwhile, he keeps getting bothered, wondering if he's doing the right thing or not. Shinichi and Minori head over to the school the next day, where they take turns to teach the kids about their otaku culture. The teaching was a little rough at first, as the nobles didn't like other species, but eventually things worked out and classes went fine for the next month. After the month is over, Miyusel finally recovers and returns back to the mansion so she can be by her master's side. After covering the basics at school, Shinichi decides to step the game up by explaining some elite otaku crap to the kids. This dude was going on about some of his preferred degenerate stuff when Minori finally told him to stop, and she instead took charge to teach students about boys' love and bottoms. Now what an amazing school that is. After a tough day at work, Shinichi was heading back with Minori when she noticed that there was an intruder around their residence. The pair takes a sneaky approach and finds a werewolf girl drawing a picture of their place. The girl's name was Elbia, and even though Shinichi didn't seem to mind her being around, the authorities had different ideas. Elbia was sent away for interrogation as she probably was a spy for a rival kingdom, but after seeing the innocence in her eyes, Shinichi firms his resolve and starts planning to help her. On his next audience with Petralka, after reporting the school's progress, Shinichi starts asking about Elbia and challenges Gallius to prove her innocence in front of everyone. Shinichi questions the girls, but despite him giving some dumb hints, Elbia makes it certain that she was actually a spy. Shinichi had learned a trick or two after all the time he spent becoming cultured, so he twists the argument and convinces Gallius and the others that letting Elbia work for him would be the best, since Eldon could use her as a source of leaking wrong information. Despite her obvious jealousy, Petralka also allows Elbia to stay with Shinichi, but bro continues to make waves and once again ends up risking getting castrated. And that brings us to the end of today's recap. Thanks for sticking till the end, and let us know in the comments if you guys want a second part of the series. Don't forget to leave us a like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. And we'll see you in the next one. Peace!